Welcome back to the Foodscaper Podcast, where we get to sit down with people reimagining what our landscapes can be, spaces that nourish not just our bodies, but our communities and ecosystems too. Today, I am joined by someone who really embodies that spirit. We've got Lauren Craig of Humble Hive Consulting. Lauren helps people bring their visions of edible and ecological landscapes to life. And she's found a way to do that stretches beyond the boundaries of geography. Through social media, remote design, and her consulting work, she's connecting with clients across the globe, not just to do garden designs, but to cultivate a real relationship with the land and people. In our conversation today, we will explore how she built her business, the tools she uses to make remote design both possible and meaningful, and the ways she's learned to listen to landscapes, even from afar. We'll also talk about the role of storytelling in design, the power of mentorship and education, and the very human side of client relationships. Lauren, so glad to have you here. Been a huge fan for so long.
Aww.
For those who have not met you, tell us about Humble Hive Consulting and how did you find yourself doing this work?
Perfect. Well, thank you for that lovely introduction. That was so kind and heartwarming. So thank you. That was really sweet. And thank you for having me on.
Super honored.
Well, thanks. So I am the, sole owner of Humble Hive Consulting, and I am a permaculture designer and homesteader. And when I'm not homesteading, and working on my 1 acre, I'm designing gardens, landscapes, and homesteads for clients, as you mentioned, all across the globe. And so I found myself kind of getting into this work in a very organic way. I didn't start my own garden until I was laid off from my job as a therapist years ago. And so that kind of launched me into the world of sustainability because very quickly that was like my gateway drug into all things sustainable. And so I shortly thereafter had my oldest son. And that led my former partner and I to renting out our house in the city and purchasing 5 acres out in the country to build our own home. And so all of a sudden, here I am, just kind of this novice gardener, and I've just been plopped down on 5 acres. And my main job, other than keeping my children alive, is to, find a way to make use of this 5 acres in a way that is not only, abundant for us as humans, but also abundant and life-giving for our local ecology. And so that led me to permaculture at that time. And so I think my first two books were Ben Falk's Resilient, the Resilient Farm and Homestead, and then Gaia's Garden. That was the other one. And so those two really gave me a really nice framework to jump off of. And so during that time, though, I was still very overwhelmed, and we couldn't afford to have somebody design something for us. So it was just a lot of years of trial and error. And when I got into permaculture, I feel like it felt, at least to me, like more of a male-dominated field, and it felt more dominated by, I'm a very creative, intuitive woman. And so I felt like it was kind of the opposite, that I was seeing in the world of permaculture. And so it almost felt like it wasn't a space for me to exist. And so I actually encouraged my former partner to do it instead. I was like, go ahead, get your certification. You've got that mind, you're that kind of person. But he didn't have the love for the plants. He didn't have, the curiosity and the intuition. And so it wasn't until we separated and I went out to the city, back into our old house, and I kind of started homesteading there and started, designing my own little edible landscapes around my urban home, that the light bulb kind of went off in my head, and I'm like, wow, I've had a lot of years of experience doing this. All those years ago, I just wish there would be this garden fairy, or this permaculture garden fairy that would just descend from the heavens and, tell me everything that I needed to do. And so that kind of became the idea for my business. And so led me to, I remember I was at a farmer's market. I was working, vending for my other small business. And I was sitting next to the baker, and it just like flashed into my head. I'm like, you know what? I've seen that Oregon State, university program online. I'm just gonna go for it. And so I told the baker next to me that I was gonna, get my design certification. She had no idea what I was talking about, but I think it was just like I needed to be heard in that moment. And so I just, registered for it there. And so that was in 2021, in the fall of 2021. And so then I entered the program in winter of 2022. And then that's kind of when my business was launched, kind of in the midst of all that.
I
So sorry,
love,
that was a long-winded
oh my gosh, I was like
response
on
to.
the edge of my seat, loving every bit of it. There was a few things that really struck me. One is just realizing, wow, like your business hasn't been around that long. I think I've been
Right.
following since the very early days.
Yes.
And you have just done such an amazing job in a short amount of time. So I'm just so impressed. But
Mm.
I think one thing that I think is really interesting that you bring to your work that just popped up for me is like this suburban and urban, excuse me, the rural and the urban experience, and just
Yeah.
being able to have both of those. I imagine them being really helpful. But most importantly, I want to just highlight what you mentioned about this male dominated industry and really just commend you for stepping up and into a space that maybe didn't feel that welcomed for you. And just, I think it's clear that you're just that much more of a badass, and inspiring
Oh,
to so many women, I'm sure, who maybe feel like they're in the same place. So props to you.
thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Will you ground us in where you are in the world?
Yeah. I'm located in Ohio, in a place called Xenia. I'm in kind of a semi-rural space myself. Yeah, so that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
Southwest Ohio region.
Yeah. So I loved your backstory, and I think you did a great job with it. Were there any kind of like specific moments or mentors within that, besides like Ben Falk and Toby Hemingway, who feel like mentors to
Yeah.
me as well, even though I haven't met them, those authors, but like people in your life who really inspired you or moments?
Um, I mean, honestly, I was so isolated. I was in a really unique circumstance, kind of during about like a decade of my life where we were just focusing on our 5 acres, living in our own little bubble. We were living in a tiny home, building this house all day, every day. It was just kind of this all-consuming life and process. And so honestly, I was incubated, and I kind of
Mhm.
feel like that was my strength personally. Like, of course we have YouTube and we have social media in order to kind of plug into various people and pick up different ideas. But what I would do is I would kind of just hop online, I would find something inspiring, and then I would just run and apply it on my 5 acres. And so I think in part, because I think sometimes there's so many different sources of inspiration, especially now. And I think it can be really overwhelming. And in some ways, I wonder if it kind of waters down the inspiration in the world, because then it's like we're all kind of thinking more similarly, as opposed to kind of each incubating and then hatching out our own very, like more unique ideas. So I had a lot of different kind of influences, and I would just kind of read a lot of books, but a lot of it was just like I would hold on to something and then I would just apply it, and maybe it would fail, but I would learn a lot from that failure, and just kind of jump beyond that. Um, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm hearing you say that the School of Hard Knocks has kind of been your biggest mentor, maybe, or teacher, but also just, maybe the plants and the land themselves, just nothing can replace the closeness of spending a lot of time doing the work and making the mistakes. And of course, that's ultimately the best teacher there is. So
Yeah.
I've noticed that with that said, you do bring some of that like um beautiful feminine energy to the plants and to the landscapes that you're interacting with. And that's always inspiring when I see that in your social media. I'm wondering, like, do any plants or really call out to you, or have you cultivated any close connections with anybody in your landscape?
Um, I mean, for me, I think it's the general feel. It's like kind of more of like the comprehensive contextual feel that all of the vegetation, together kind of engenders to the space. Um, so I think more than anything, I operate off of like a feeling, even when I'm working with, clients. It's like, what is the feeling? Like, what are the adjectives you want to use to kind of to describe this place in the future? And usually it's those adjectives that then kind of help me discern what plants would best bring that out, and then kind of meet their other needs, whether it be edible or medicinal or, need for shade or whatever. So yeah, I don't know that there's a specific plant that calls out to me, but it's more of like I fall in love with a million plants with every design because it's like, oh my gosh, this plant can meet 5 different needs for this family.
Yeah.
And so then of course I'm in love with that plant that day. And then the next day it's another one. So I would say it really kind of depends based on the project. I'm always falling in love with new plants.
A true plant lover.
Indeed, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's just a really important just part of this work is that we see everything as part of the community, and when we see more than one plant, when not in isolation but as part of this
Yeah,
beautiful web of life, then the love grows deeper and the connection just grows deeper. I want to circle back more
absolutely.
to the client stuff that you
Mhm.
mentioned, but we'll get there. I want to start us off with more talk about your social media because
Yeah.
I've just been following along, as I mentioned, and it's just done really beautifully. And I have a lot to learn, and I imagine a lot of other foodscapers do. So, social media having been a big part of your visibility, tell us more about how you've used it to connect with people that resonate with your work. Like, how do you view your social media time and energy?
Yeah, yeah. So I see it as a very like personal extension. And for me, to be happy as a business owner, happy as a human, I have to, everything that comes out of me has to be led by happiness and passion. So it's like anything that I kind of put out there, into the social media world, I want it to be an extension of, my belief system and my values and things that really excite me. So usually it's like, at this point anyway, before I used to have kind of a specific strategy of, I want to post 3 to 5 times a week and, I kind of want to hit these things. And then now it's become more of a like, what am I feeling really jazzed about in this moment? And so that might mean I post once a week or twice a week now. But I just want to make sure that everything that comes out of me is something that I'm passionate about because what I find is that as long as I'm doing that, I'm getting the exact clients that I want. I mean, so I love my clients. I love the people that end up finding me. And I think the way that I do that is just by making sure that whatever I put out there, I'm excited about, because then anyone who's excited about it too is going to be more inclined to reach out to me. And we're, then likely to kind of be on the same page and be a good fit for one another.
Yeah, I think social media is so good at helping you get the right client because if you're just words on a screen and you don't get your personality doesn't shine through, then you can't be, vetted properly necessarily, and you may get a poor match.
Right. Truly. Yeah.
So I think yeah, that's so interesting that you're not following any kind of schedule or plan. And that's one thing that I'm always thinking a lot about is like, if I don't make a plan, then I kind of just fall off the social media bandwagon. But you
Right.
have done a good job kind of keeping it present, but clearly not like overwhelming your brain space with it.
Yeah, I felt it overwhelming for a while, and I started realizing I was spending way too many hours, a week on it, and I wasn't very happy as a human. And so I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, there's got to be a way that I believed that I would get the business that I needed if I just put out nothing but good stuff. And that really is what's happened. So even though I'm posting less, I'm still finding the business is coming to me just as much, if not more. So I think it's interesting. I feel like not to be too like kind of out there, but I feel like it's an energetic thing, so just kind of relaxing that I think has been really helpful.
One of the things we hear from pro foodscapers all the time is this need for more community, connection, and education. And that's why we've created the Foodscaper membership. This is our online forum and learning space just for pro foodscapers. You can share your work, get feedback from me and other professionals, and watch dozens of classes in our training library. It's just $29. First month is free. We would love to see you there. Other ways are you attracting clients besides social media?
Yeah, so I 2 years ago I started offering in-person classes, local to my area, because I wanted just to kind of dip my toe into that realm and see how it felt to teach. I used to do group therapy as a therapist, and I loved it. And so I was like, I think I would really enjoy teaching classes, and sure enough, I did. And so that, those in-person classes allowed me to form a relationship with my clients, locally, that kind of helped build a good name for myself. And people were talking about the classes to other people and, jumping on, different social media gardening groups and saying, hey, I just went to this great class. And then that, of course, led to this past year, I started doing online class offerings. And so that's been another really great way to, reach my clientele. Because oftentimes, someone will take my class and then they'll book a consultation with me for a custom design. And so, it's nice just to be able to have, because a lot of people need that extra point of contact before actually jumping and hiring you. They need to know that, you're their kind of person and feel comfortable with you and feel like you have the information that they need. And so, the classes have been a really great way of doing that. And then I know locally too, I mean, local business, I think it's probably 60%, 70% of my business at present. And so it's really important for me to maintain kind of face out in, my local community. And so trying to do again, like operating from that place of passion within, I'm like, what gets me excited, and so trying to take on different like pro bono projects and stuff like that too, I think are a really great way of showing the community what you're about, what you stand for, and showing something like a physical representation of something that you have done, just kind of putting it out in the world. So those are all ways. Yeah, and then just doing kind of different events and stuff like that in a similar
Mhm.
way, like local events. Yeah.
Yeah, I've found classes to be incredibly helpful as well. And I used to think of them a little bit more like, is this going to pay for itself? Like, how much time do I have to put in it? How much do I have to charge? And then I realized that it's actually the best marketing money you can spend because you get to do something that feeds your soul, teach and share with people, but then you end up getting clients from it who are already very educated about what you do, what you believe in, and it makes for a great marriage of a client.
Absolutely.
So it's like huge win. And that was
Completely
interesting
agree.
that you've got 70% of your business that's local and 30% that you're doing more remote.
It might be 60/40. It kind of depends, but yeah, it's within that range. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so walk us through your services, and kind
Mhm.
of how those break down in terms of your revenue as well.
Yeah. So, just like the base level one is just consultations. And so I charge 75 an hour for consultations, whether that's in person or virtual. And, it's important to me that clients feel like they're getting their money's worth. So I really do, I kind of prorate it. So if we only meet 45 minutes, it's 55/25. And I think like the honesty behind that too really conveys, I guess, what I stand for as a person and as a business. And then, so after the consultation, sometimes clients, of course, just want the consultation and just want some insight on where to place this or that. And then other times they want the consultation for custom designs. So that's kind of the other set of offerings that I have. And so following the consults, I provide the quote within 2 business days of our time together. And then that quote outlines everything that'll be included in the design, as well as like their delivery date, and just kind of what to expect. And then they just get back to me and yay or nay that kind of moving forward, and then provide 50% deposit upfront to kind of book the slot. And then, beyond that, because I was having clients that were asking for similar elements, clients were asking for gardens and they were asking for orchards and berry patches and, just annual raised bed plans. I decided to go ahead and, because that can be costly for one individual to commission. And so I wanted to make it more widely accessible to people. And so I went ahead and, put some kind of ready to go garden designs together so that clients could just purchase them off of my website, just purchase the plans, kind of ready to go. And so that was just available digitally at first. And then I went ahead and had them, they were doing well. So I went ahead and had those printed up in physical form. And so I have, stores that go ahead and stock, whichever books they're most interested in stocking. And so I have wholesale and consignment relationships with various stores. And so that's been a really nice way to kind of passively, get an income, but also to, again, build relationships, so I'm really focusing at this point on kind of local stores. But when clients are seeing my name pop up, in gardening groups, and then they're seeing my designs out in the world, that just lends itself to, building that much more credibility in my designs and, in my business. So that's been really a really wonderful aspect of things that I've been enjoying. And then, of course, the classes. So I've been doing, classes in person and online. And then I also last year started doing homestead tours of my 1 acre, because I think it's really important. Again, as someone who used to be partnered, I didn't think that I could homestead alone. I didn't think it was a possibility. I thought I needed my partner's skills and know-how to be able to make it. And so I really want to show people that regardless of, your skill set, regardless of your income, regardless of the time that you have, you really can make huge changes in your life and produce a ton of food if you have the desire. And, so showing people a physical way of like, this is what it looks like. This is how I got there. It's entirely possible. That's been a really great way of just, again, building a sense of kind of community about my business, but also, just making points of contact. So every time I have a tour, I end up getting multiple clients from that, custom design clients, or then I have all of my books laid out and then they're purchasing, my garden design books while they're there. And so it's just been it's been a really fun way, just to kind of spend one day a month, to build business and again, kind of keep my name out in the community.
Yeah. Yeah. It's starting to come together for me why you're so busy, like booked up, like why you have so many
Yeah.
clients, because you're doing such a great job of creating these opportunities for connection with people. And then they can reach out in an organic way to
Right.
go deeper. Um, I love this idea of creating like booklets, I think you called them, or book,
Mhm.
that you can leave locally, because yeah, I can imagine that most people listening to this podcast have like hit the repeat button on a lot of different aspects of their design work or, garden plan creation work, and that's all proprietary and could
Right.
be used in the same way that you're doing it. So
Definitely.
taking a quick break to remind you about our monthly Pro Talks. These are free, live, continuing education classes taught by some of the most inspiring, ecological, edible landscapers in the business. These Pro Talks give you foodscaper education that you truly can't find anywhere else. So join us each month. If you're a member, you'll also get the recording. Enroll in the next Pro Talk at foodscaper.com/Pro Talks. Taking a quick break to remind you about our monthly Pro Talks. These are free, live, continuing education classes taught by some of the most inspiring, ecological, edible landscapers in the business. These Pro Talks give you foodscaper education that you truly can't find anywhere else. So join us each month. If you're a member, you'll also get the recording. Enroll in the next Pro Talk at foodscaper.com/Pro Talks. Any new products or services that you have rolled out that didn't work out well, that you kind of peeled back in?
Not that I can think of. I mean, the one thing would be like timing on classes. Because it seems like people are really chomping at the bit. I'm sure you've had the same experience. Like people are chomping at the bit for classes, end of winter, beginning of spring, just so they can, get a cohesive plan. They're just like, I want all the knowledge and I want it now. And then, I feel like I would go ahead and I would have classes slated for, summertime, and it would just be pretty dead. And so it seems to pick up again kind of late fall when people have slowed down outside and they're beginning to plan and think about the following year. So I guess for me, it would be, I just kind of had to rein it in and be like, nope,
Yeah.
this is the 1 month a year. These are the 2 months a year that I'm going to really focus on classes. And then the rest I'm just not going to because the energy just isn't there.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think of something you said earlier, and to tie it together, like when we do classes and things in that late winter, early springtime, and there's the energy is through the roof, you can bring in a
Right.
lot of clients. But usually also at that time, I'm booked out a few months. So it's like you get these people who
Right.
are so buzzed, they're high on like your garden talk, and then you're like, it's gonna be June until
Right.
I can get to you because everybody else has already, been in line. And
Yeah.
then what I just want to highlight you for is how you're giving like this very specific date of when you can expect completion, as well as you'll get it turned around, within 2 days, at least the design proposal. And
Mhm.
just setting those expectations, I just think is like such a inspiration for people who are spending their time like in the contracting adjacent industry where it's just the opposite. People are
Right.
so used to being treated like time doesn't matter and I'll get to you when I can. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of lacking professionalism there. And I can
Mhm.
just imagine how warm and taken care of people feel when they get these proposals from you. And then they're like, this is when you can expect things from me. And I'm going to work my ass off if I have to
Yeah,
make sure that you are getting what you ask for in a timely manner. So good on you for that. I think
I
that's,
appreciate that. Yeah, I find it helpful too, though, because I mean, if I don't have things kind of squared away or kind of compartmentalized in a certain sense, my brain is going too much as a business owner, and then I feel like I'm flailing. So for me,
Mhm.
just being like, okay, this is the week that is sectioned off for this person's design. I don't have to think about it until that week. Then it just like clears my mind. And, so it's just like I know I've got a very concrete delivery date, and that's when I think about the design. I don't need to think about it now.
Yeah, it's such a gift to yourself too, because then
Yeah.
you don't have to just like have it on your list of like, oh, I've got so many things on my list. You can just know that like I've got one thing on my list this week,
Yes.
Jerry's design. That's it.
Yes.
Whatever.
Exactly.
Um, So I want to transition us a little bit to remote
Mhm.
design. You said that you
Yeah.
do that a little bit, and I find that um, just something I haven't done much of. So I'm
Mhm.
curious about it, and it feels to me like the whole site assessment piece would be tricky. Um,
Yeah.
so I want to talk about or hear from you about what is tricky about it and how do you handle things like weed populations, understanding
Mhm.
invasive weeds, and or tricky water flow, or just
Right.
some of the things that I find myself noticing in in-person consultations, and I'm just like, would I have noticed that during a remote consultation? So
Right.
talk to us about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, first and foremost, I didn't start doing remote design work until maybe a year or year and a half into starting my business. I had people approach me, and it just didn't feel right yet. And I was a little hesitant for all the reasons that you mentioned. And then I don't remember, what the, what the client was that kind of broke the camel's back and that allowed me to jump into it. But I started to realize, like I was becoming more and more comfortable with a lot of the different, just, using Google Earth, right? And using, the US like soil database and just kind of utilizing different tools to be able to kind of plan for my projects. I mean, because even with local in-person projects, I usually only go to the site one time, unless it's like a big, unless it's multi-acres and it's something I need to see it multiple times of the year. Most of the time, I'm just kind of going there once and I'm taking my measurements and, making notes and taking photos and videos that way. So I was like, okay, as long as the sites are straightforward enough, then I'm open to working with a client. So, as long as there aren't like huge topographical differences in an area, or as long as there's not, a huge kind of drainage issue. And I make sure to ask those questions, of course, in kind of that initial consultation, just to get a general sense of things. And so in the case that someone has like 40 acres and they want guidance on all of that, of course, I would have to come out in person, to do something like that. But the other option for clients in those cases would be just kind of a general consultation where we walk through, if it's, walk through like Google Earth together and kind of walk through their property while I'm working with them from a distance, just to talk about all the various portions and what they imagine existing in each of those areas, just to kind of, at least if they just want a general sense of where would be best to place this element or that. Then those are things that I'll do just via consultation. But other times, let's say, if a client is like, I have this sloped area, it's, in full shade, and I want to design for it, I'm not going to very likely do that from a distance because there are a lot of different variables that might make it difficult for me to, really do an effective job at that. So in those cases, I offer species selection charts, where I'll just go ahead and I ask them, at what layer do you want this, this species list to start? So if they want, the tallest of trees, then I'll start with that and go all the way down to, fungus and bulbs if they'd like. But just in each of the different categories, provide a list of items that would meet their needs, whether that be, medicinal, edible, or other sorts of needs they might have for livestock, and just let them know, the species that would fare best in their situation, just to kind of offer some general guidance. And so, yeah, and so then, but from there, what we'll usually do is, once we've kind of decided, generally speaking, where all the elements should go, then oftentimes it's, what are you most pressed to begin on now? What do you want to establish now? And then, if they're establishing a new home, oftentimes it's the landscape and a kitchen garden. So then I'll go ahead and provide a quote for each of those, and then make sure that they provide me with photos and an actual video of them, walking me around the site and kind of pointing out different things like, well, this is the area that tends to be really wet that I told you about, or this is the area where deer, walk through all the time. And so then I just make sure I make note of that, when I'm actually putting together the quote or actually doing the design for them.
Yeah.
So I'm just selective.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you saying that. And I'm hearing you say that, not everything is a yes, that you can say no
Yes.
to things. And that is like what a incredibly powerful, tool that is in the tool belt, to just say, that's not me. Like,
Yeah.
or I can't do that for you. That's not possible. And just being
Right.
okay with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Are there any questions that you like to ask that feel especially illuminating, that you would say other foodscapers might really appreciate this question? It's not a standard question, but
Right.
just something a little bit more that goes a layer deeper.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of touched on it earlier. I mentioned it a little bit, but just asking them, you know, just different areas of their site. What adjectives
Mm,
do you want to be able to use to describe this space in the future? What do you want to feel when you enter this part of your property? Because I feel like that really illuminates a lot And because with some clients, it might be kind of like, a more ornate, more orderly sort of situation. And other people, they want to, go into this meandering jungle. And so those adjectives really work to guide my design and again, guide the vegetation that I then choose.
Yeah, I love that. And it just makes me want to spend time in different landscapes and see how I feel in them and really like connect with those adjectives myself so that I can be more articulate in that way and help facilitate that conversation. Because I think in general, even though we're garden people,
Mhm.
we may not have awesome adjectives around how we
Right.
feel. We may just, think this is great, love it, but
Yeah, yeah, sure.
um, so I wanted to kind of drill a little bit further down into this
Mhm.
remote design. Any stories of like things gone wrong where you're like, oh, I didn't think about that, and I probably would have if I was on site.
Right. That's what I was worried about. And that's what led me to not do remote designs for a bit.
Yeah.
And so I guess thankfully, knock on wood, I haven't, to my knowledge, made any, mistakes yet working from a distance. But I use the mistakes that I've, made in person,
Yeah.
to make sure that I don't make those mistakes from a distance. And so, just making sure to ask about things like allelopathic vegetation, just the presence of it. So making sure they let me know if black walnut or tree of heaven or whatever is kind of surrounding the design site. And just making sure to ask about wildlife and making sure to ask about, water, the presence of water and, where it comes from and where it goes on landscapes. So as you mentioned, just kind of making sure I hit all of those little snags that, can happen with any kind of design, just making sure I address those in the initial consultation and then just kind of like the follow-up leading up to the design. So just making sure I have enough information to go off of has really helped me from making too many mistakes. And then also, of course, like always checking measurements with clients. So not just relying on Google Earth, to obtain measurements, especially when it's a landscape and things are a little bit tighter and every inch or every, foot, of course, matters greatly. And so just making sure that I, validate all of the measurements with clients as well has been really helpful.
Hey friends, we are wrapping up the first portion of our interview here, but you can listen to the full episode inside the Foodscaper membership. Members get access to the complete episode, our full library of training videos, and a community forum where you can get feedback on your work and make professional connections as you build your edible landscaping career. Get that first month free at thefoodscaper.com/membership. And thank you so much for listening. Keep growing.